Okay. Give me 1 second. I was going to go ahead and introduce you first before I bring you on, but you couldn't hear me, so I may as well keep you here.
Okay,
Okay. Give me one moment, please.
sure.
1 second. I was going to go ahead and introduce you first. So it's 24 hours. In 24 hours, some 8.2 million Cameroonians over the age of 20 will be deciding on who will be the next president of Cameroon. The incumbent, Paul Biya, who is 92 years old, is seeking an eighth term after 43 years in power. And on the other hand, on the other side, we have 11 contenders trying to unseat him, with two key players being former ministers who recently resigned from government and are from the northern part of the country. Tchiroma is a big favorite in this election. He recently resigned. This man was Minister of Vocational Training, as well as in the past government spokesperson, and had been an MP before. He has pulled crowds that are unprecedented. He is gathering steam and building momentum across the country, and he's the man who certainly the government did not see come. He has taken the country by storm, is referred to as a virus because he leaves no one indifferent. Some love him, and some are kind of uncomfortable with him because of the past that he has as government spokesperson, where he made lots of scathing statements considered cynical during when there were burning issues in the country. Joining us today is a man who is a household name in Cameroonian journalism and transcended his newsroom responsibilities to become a world-class communication executive, sitting at the tables with princes, whispering in the ears of the decision makers of this world and influencing them as they shaped world economic policies. Eric Chinje is our guest this morning, and he'll be discussing the reason why he has endorsed Tchiroma and is going full on to support him, and is encouraging Cameroonians to do so as well. Good morning, Mr. Chinje.
Good morning, Angie, and glad to be here.
Thank you
I
so
think
much
this
for
is our
that.
first exchange, and I should say it's historic in its own because I got through my journalism professional introduction from your dad. So,
Wow, what a time. And I know that my mom and you may have been classmates as well, Dolly coming
absolutely
Foreman.
were. Yes, yes, yes.
So,
So
this
this is we've circled, grounded the circle now. It's full.
and I don't know if I'm comfortable having an interview with you because you are a gargantuan figure with regards to the trade, but also of because of the connections that we have. I'll try my best, and you might grade me at the end. You are supporting Tchiroma in this coming election, and he obviously is the favorite and the man that nobody really saw. And prior to your endorsement of Tchiroma, you were working seriously in the backgrounds to come up with a coalition. I've heard you say Bello Buba was somebody that you frequently engaged, but I also know that you had publicly stated your support for Professor Kuvanda of the Univer Party's decision to back Barrister Akiremuna, who himself is now supporting or canvassing for votes on behalf of Bello Buba Magari. The first question I want to ask you, did you see Tchiroma coming, and would you, in your wildest of dreams, have thought that this would be the man that the entire country is talking about 4 months ago?
Well, thank you. I think the timing of this exchange could not be better because we are just hours away from the from voting for the next president of Cameroon, and it is my hope that we will elect for the first time in the history of the country. We will be electing a man who could have been a woman, but in this case it's a man, who would be the first freely chosen leader of the nation. I hope we get there. There are no guarantees. There are lots of obstacles, but there's a good chance the next president of Cameroon will be called Tchiroma Bakari.
And you speak of freely chosen, and it's interesting because Ahidjo wasn't freely chosen. Paul Biya was handed, given power on a silver platter, and ever since we know what the story has been. The 1992 election, which was won by the opposition, but which somehow did not end up in the hands of the opposition. In 2004 as well, we know that the election was contested by the SDF. 2011, we know that the election was contested by the opposition. A group of opposition parties came together calling for the annulment of an election that was marred by excessive rigging and fraud. I covered it in Balawan, at a public school in Balawan, and I remember spending the whole day there up until 4 p.m., going to the television station where I discharged duty to file my report, and returning right about towards the end of the closing of the polls. And we had gone from about 180 votes to about 2,000 votes within 2 hours of my absence. So, but at that time, again, the opposition was not able to really agree, and nothing was done despite their cries of rigging and fraud. And then 2018, Maurice Kamto, who became very popular, also decried the same things and even came out and said he believed he had won the election. We are in 2025. Issa Tchiroma is a man from the system, the opposition to the system, and then the opposition again. And my question is, the fraud architecture of Cameroon has not changed. Why do you think that this time around is a charm and this is the man to do the job and to end this 43-year nightmare?
As I said earlier, I hope he does win this election and is declared the winner, because I think we have two separate realities here. One is, of course, winning, and the other is being declared the winner. We're doing everything we can to ensure that in both cases we come out with the true story of these elections. I believe Mr. Tchiroma, which is the reason I support him, is now very clearly, he's demonstrated that he connects with Cameroonians. If he's going to be the choice of the country, he needs to connect with the country, and he's demonstrated that. And for me, it's not about Tchiroma per se. For me, it's about the country. I'll tell you how my views on these elections evolved and how it got to Tchiroma. When prior to the approval of 12 candidates from a group of 83 men and women who applied to the electoral body, ELECAM, to be president, 12 were chosen. And of the 12 that, prior to all of that, prior to ELECAM, announcing its choice of the 12, I had attended, I had just arrived in Cameroon from the US and attended a political gathering, and I didn't know what the purpose of the political gathering was, but I was told there were a number of parties that had come together and were meeting to discuss the upcoming elections. Turned out to be Univer of Mr. Nkumbondo, which you mentioned, and other parties. And I was told, well, they're trying to, get a single candidate that will be presented to the public for the upcoming presidential elections, and this was in 2024 when the conclave, because the party militants were all sitting, hundreds of thousands of them sitting outside, and also the party leaders were in a conclave in some office. When they came out, they announced it was Mr. Tchiroma that they've chosen to be the candidate of this group of parties. And so I was asked to speak at that event, totally unprepared. And I did. And in the process said, well, whatever you've done seems to be just right, because I know Mr. Tchiroma is a childhood friend. We've, grown together, played in the Cameroon socio-political environment. And so I naturally had no problem supporting Mr. Muna. And then since I had just arrived in the country, I was interviewed by a number of television stations in the country, and and everybody wanted to know what had happened. We didn't know you were in the country. Now you're here, and the first thing we hear is you've endorsed someone for president. And I had to explain. I said, well, I did because I thought it was a good moment for an English-speaking Cameroonian to be elected to that office, because we've had, for a few reasons, we've had two French-speaking people occupy the seat of president, Mr. Amadou Ahidjo and Mr. Paul Biya, and I thought it was time for someone from the English-speaking, with an English-speaking background, to be president. And the second reason I thought also was, we needed to also try the systems that came out of the Anglophone culture. So I thought, these were compelling reasons for someone with that background to become president. So I endorsed Mr. Muna, and on television I did a lot of promoting the idea of an Anglophone Cameroonian becoming president. So that's where this whole thing started. And then, of course, we get to months go by, and we get to late July of this year, when 12 candidates were selected. By the time that happened, my own political views and understanding of the environment in Cameroon had evolved. And I came out of that experience thinking that it was time to move the country in a different direction. We can talk about this later, about the state of the country. But I was convinced we needed to move the country in a different direction, and we needed some kind of a rupture, a break, clean break from the past. And I saw on the list of 12, two young people. One of them called Hiram Iyodi, and the other called
Atekiseka, the two youngest candidates in this race.
37 and 39. And I called both men. And I told them, I said, I'm not sure how this is all going to turn out, but I think the two of you should work together on a program that would excite the youth of Cameroon. This is an opportunity for the youth of Cameroon to clearly determine what they want to see in the direction of this country and in the quality of their leaders. And I think you two have not only a generational relationship with the youth, but you can come up with the ideas that the older generation of leaders don't have. So why don't you, in spite of the institutional arrangements which have the two of you put up as competitors, why don't you sit together, at least have your teams work on a common program, and we will support you. That's what I told them. Because that was prior to me understanding the inner dynamics of that whole process. And these two men were not, I would later find out, totally um, masters of their own programs.
What makes you say that?
Well, I mean, they were chosen by a political party which they didn't own, um, and they had to, you know, besides their own independent ideas, they had to play to the tune of those who owned the party and financed each of their parties. So it was whole, I got to understand the full meaning of that, and I realized it wasn't going to happen that way. And the two young men, of course, um, did not quite see it my way. Each of them was convinced that they had to prove themselves and they could, which was a good thing. They had to prove themselves. But I think they believed that they could meaningfully get to be president of Cameroon. It's a good thing to have, and I applaud that. But I kind of saw it differently, and very quickly I moved away from that ideal of a youth program led by young people. And now, as the politics as the campaigns rolled in and people started crisscrossing the country, it very quickly became evident to me and to others that the key to getting rid of the ruling party lay in the north of Cameroon with the two former ministers. They were the only two former ministers in the race. There were two very experienced people, and they came from a regional demographic that carried weight
Yeah,
and could determine.
officially, the northern
Yes,
parts of the country have the largest number of voters, especially the far north.
exactly.
Balabuba and Issa Chiroma are from the north, but those three regions, the Adamawa, the north, and the far north, speak Fulfulde across the three regions, and so they've been able to create some kind of identity, if we can call it that way. And yes, they are key players in the upcoming election because of that. Because of the experience that they have as members of government, they understand the dynamics of the system. They've been on both ends, the opposition, and they've pacted with the government at some point.
Yeah.
And but I want to come back to some of the things you've said, referring to Issa Chiroma, his magnetism, his ability to connect with people. I've read some senior members of the press corporation say that he sees you and he greets you as if you met yesterday, you were together yesterday evening. He has a way with words and an outstanding capacity to persuade people. And he's an outstanding and a very astute politician, pretty shrewd. But his gift is in fact his curse because he has a past. And with the gifting that he has, when he was a member of government, there were some very fiery statements, very incendiary declarations, very cynical lines of actions. He says today that he was just a vector of the government's thoughts. He says he is not responsible for the things that he said. Do you think that is enough to sell his case to Cameroonian people? Put the crowds aside that really want change from every indication. Don't you think he can take some more ownership of the things that he said when you think of the girl with the stolen baby for whom I almost got arrested in 2011 or early 2012, when you think of Monique Kumatekel lying in front of a hospital with a stomach bleeding and already and dead at some point, Bibi Ngota, whom he came out and said, as the big boss of all the journalists in Cameroon, came out and said the man had died of AIDS, exposing the confidentiality, the secret of the man's medical records, which his family believes says was not even true. Don't you think that it could also help for him to at some point say, listen, I know I was a member of government and I was a government spokesperson, but I could have put some water in my wine. I could have diluted some of the things that I said. I mean, there were ministers before him, government spokespeople. There were ministers after him who were government take the man, for instance, who is in communication. They support the government, but they will not be remembered Half as vividly as Issa Chiroma for all the right or wrong reasons. Do you think he has taken ownership enough?
Very, very interesting. We uh, we learn as we go along, and I open my mind and my heart to new concepts and new questions, and I try to find the answers that I can find based on my own experience. And you've thrown in a few elements into this questioning that I did not quite, I've not quite had to address before. Um, but based on what I know and based on why I made the decision to um, support Mr. Chiroma, and there's a whole story there. I can get to that later. Um, Let me say this. I have known Mr. Tchiroma for most of the last 20, almost 30 years, most of the last 25 maybe, and going up to 30 years. I've known him for that amount of time. I knew him when he was vehemently opposed to the government. So he was in the opposition. That's when I met him for the first time. And then he had just, and then he, I knew him in that capacity, and later on as Minister of Communication and so on. And I saw the man in two separate worlds and how he carried himself in both of them. I worked with him when he was in the opposition, and I worked with him when he was minister and member of government. And I came to the inevitable conclusion that Issa Chiroma was a rare gem of a politician. And let me use the 3 or 4 terms that I thought and still think best describe him. 1, he's a patriot. 2, he's very humble, very human. 3, as honest a politician as they come. And 4, someone who gives his word and you can count on. Now, that's the man I came to know, independent of everything else. And then, of course, I see him in action. And I try to understand the man. In 2004, shortly after I got to know him, the opposition in Cameroon were coming up into an election, presidential election, like this one. And I saw Mr. Tchiroma. As a matter of fact, prior to that, the reason I got to know him was because he had become the spokesperson of the northern parts of the country, which had effectively been abandoned by the government. The few to no government programs of worth in the northern part of the country, hardly any infrastructure, hardly any schools, no medical facilities, and so on. So he had become the spokesperson of the North, writing what became like epistles every week. And I was reading this and wondering, who is this man? So I got to meet him and interacted extensively with him, and he was so viciously opposed to the government. It's like, my goodness, And then I found out he'd been a minister. He'd been in jail for 6 years. And then I could tell that he was informed by a very unusual experience. So I got to work with him, and Issa Tchiroma led the initiative to identify a single candidate for the opposition in 2004.
4.
He led he and a group of people came up with a set of criteria to help them select from the multiplicity of candidates to select the one candidate that they needed. And they all agreed on the set of criteria, and they went to work, the larger group now, and went into a conclave which eliminated pretty much as what's done in the election of a pope. And they went through many rounds of elimination and eventually got down to two. And there's a lot of excitement, a lot of,
Damjoya and Fundi,
yes, it
I
eventually got
believe.
to Damje and Frundi. You obviously want me to accelerate this. Yes, they got to Damje and Frundi. And then in the final round, Frundi was selected. And out of it, sorry, there's a call coming in. Oof, I messed that up. Sorry. Yeah. So they eventually got to the final two, and Damjaya was selected, not Frundi. And when Damjaya was selected, you know the story well. Frundi walked out of the room, and that opportunity of identifying or getting um, a single candidate was lost. And of course, Mr. Bia retained his presidency. And the reason Mr. Frundi gave, and he spoke to me at the time, was he was the more popular candidate. He was the
Fundi
more
felt
popular.
betrayed by
Yes.
Tchiroma.
No. That's the wrong way to look at it. He told me. He said there was absolutely no way he could have given in to Ndamjoya because he was the more popular candidate. That Mr. Frundi told me himself. And he wasn't betrayed by anybody. He was betrayed by the criteria that had been agreed to by all of them. And, even some folks of the CPDM, of the SDF, of his party, and many of them are still around, Mr. Martin Kemgu, for example, I asked them later on, and they said, yeah, precisely, the chairman was wrong.
So
He
why do
should have.
you think that? And I beg your
Mhm.
pardon. I didn't mean
Yeah,
to
so
cut you
anyway, let me just end by saying that I
off.
saw how Mr. Tchiroma managed that process, and he was right. And it was at the end of that process, when it failed to deliver for the country, that he said, I have nothing to do with these people anymore. I'm going to have to, offer my services to a government that at least functions. That's how he went on over to
But
the government.
and that brings me to a question. Even though I wanted to ask something else,
Yeah.
isn't that a stretch to go from the champion of the champion of a coalition to, I mean, crossing over into the government and becoming its spokesperson? Isn't that a
Well,
reach?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very good question. I think I could, because I thank God was in Cameroon when he made the move, and you know, he was totally frustrated. I think I sat down with him and a group of others, and he was explaining his decision, why he had decided to move over to the government. That he didn't. Throughout the process, all he had to confront at every step of the way were these egos that were stronger than any argument in favor of Cameroon. So people, rather than see Cameroon, saw, themselves, the narcissism of it all, the egotistical nature of the entire process. So he moved on because he thought it would be almost impossible for the opposition to organize itself enough to take power in Cameroon. So he decided he wanted to go serve the country through the government. And I could see that. I saw with him. I saw with him. And he did. And in government, he went and committed to working for the government, and he did with a verve and determination and commitment that you saw with very few ministers. So, yes, part of his gift is part of his curse. I think I can see that.
So you're saying that he's all in or he's completely out. He's that kind of
Absolutely.
person, and he
Exactly.
can even appear almost theatrical sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, his declaration sometimes would leave you flabbergasted.
Speechless. Yes.
Yeah, but
Hmm.
again, a very, very, I mean, a powerful gift of persuasion, as we've seen across the country, and
Hmm.
uncanny ability to just adapt to circumstances, unforeseen circumstances. You refer to him as honest, as humble, and somebody that you can count on in personal circles. Why do you think that he has been given the label of somebody who is treacherous and somebody whose versatility always puts his relationships, his political relationships, in limbo?
Well, because he's moved from one extreme end of the political spectrum to the other. I mean, when somebody does that, and if you don't have the inside um, elements of decision making, you'd see a flip flopper. And I do not think he's a flip flopper. He's
Is
someone who's
politics not a game of perception?
a lot of politics is a game of perception. That's why he's so popular now. Because I think people are seeing someone who can deliver for them. They're seeing the human side of Issa Chiroma. Yes, politics is a game of perception. And let me say this: even Jesus would be rejected in Cameroon today if he were not, if he came on his knees. I think we do not have, as my friend Rebecca Enonchon said, this is our bandit.
He's
He
a
he
means
is a bandit,
and a
but
tool.
he is our bandit. I think that's what Becky said. I
But
hope I'm not
isn't there that
misquoting her.
looming danger, that fear in the back of your mind that if he can evolve, if as you see his trajectory, his evolution, we can have another pivot from him?
Yes.
Private
Um,
deals with a regime that is doing everything to continue to survive and becoming even more ruthless
Issa
by the
Chiroma,
day.
Issa Chiroma is in the opposition, and he will he's committed to the opposition. He's committed to pursuing what it is. He is the first and the most important element I find in this man is his ability. Well, it's his sense of patriotism. I do not think Issa is in this solely to be president. He's in this because he thinks Cameroon needs saving. He is in this because he wants to work for Cameroon. I'm totally convinced about that. As I
That's the
say,
way he
I've seen
speaks.
him in the opposition setting out to fight for the leadership of the opposition and understanding that somebody else. Look, let me tell you about him and Nijan Fundi and Damjoya, these two. I took him to both. Nijan Fundi had told me he doesn't want to have anything to do with Issa Chiroma. I've heard about him. He's a rebel. He described him in many ways. And I came and I told Issa Chiroma in 2003. And I said, um, the, if you're interested in working together with the other opposition leaders, you need to go and talk to Nijan Fundi. You know, I don't know what it is stopping you from going. He said, no, nothing. I'll go. And he ran over to see Nijan Fundi. We went over to Bamenda. And then I said, okay, then why don't you also meet Ndamjoya? He said, no, I'll never meet Ndamjoya. He's a hypocrite. That's the word he used. And I said, but you guys of the opposition cannot consistently be condemning everybody. I don't see how you're going to build this opposition into a strong enough force to counter the CPDM. He says, well, okay, well, if he's willing to see me, yes, I'll meet with him. So I went over and I told Ndamjoya that Mr. Tchiroma thinks you're a hypocrite, but he's willing to meet with you. And that's how the two men met. I spare you the details. But again, I could see Issa Tchiroma wanting to do something for the country by building a singular opposition. And even though he came from the north with its electoral might, he backed Nijan Fundi. he said, and then he helped in putting together the criteria that ultimately led to Mr. Ndamjoya, whom he thought was a hypocrite. But he was willing to support him because he'd been the product of a process. I developed a lot of respect for the man, as you can tell.
So
We
he's
have the other
run.
half of the story when he was a minister and how I worked with him when he was minister.
I was going to ask you, what your thoughts were when you heard some of the things he said about the Anglophone crisis, about Agbobala, whom he qualified as a terrorist. Agbobala ended up in jail for nothing, but he was considered a terrorist and a target.
Agbobala was on the campaign
Yes,
trail
endorsed
yesterday
him.
with Mr.
Yes,
Tchiroma.
yes,
If
that is
Mr.
true.
If Mr. Atanganji, a minister, were to come out tomorrow and to run for president, you probably accuse him of worse things, and he's an Anglophone. If Mr. Ngongo were to come out and want to present himself for that office, you'll accuse him of worse things
And that is the
with
fear
regard to the
of
Anglophone
critics
crisis.
who
So
still
there's
have
no
cold
single.
feet with regards to him, Mr. Chinje. The fear of his critics now is that, first of all, his past is a little too recent, but also it sets a dangerous precedent where henchmen of the BR regime can crisscross or flip-flop or cross the carpet at convenience and just plaster a makeshift apology to be accepted by the people. Critics believe that it is so much easier to cross into the opposition and flatter a people who are desperately yearning for change than it is for an opposition person with convictions to sway in a slightly different direction than the crowd is going. I see the conversations on social media, and I've engaged with a lot of politicians and activists, and the perceptions are the same. Some are targeted for not supporting him, are considered blacklegs or sellouts, and they are hesitant because of the pattern recognition, the patterns they have seen with him over the years. But also, they feel it is just a little and too, it is too quick. It's moving a little too fast for comfort. And they don't feel that he has given them the guarantees that this time around there would not be a secret deal that will make him, for instance, a vice prime minister.
I don't, again, it's, one eyes, if we'll have to have a Jesus Christ, who's clean, and I'm not sure that you'd find him in in the politics of the country. And I think people adapt to circumstances. And I've told you, again, if I were to sit here and say Mr. Tchiroma is that Messiah, I'll be wrong. If I were to sit here and tell you I think he's the most the purest politician in Cameroon, obviously I'd be wrong. We have to deal with, we have to work with the cards we've been dealt. And of a group of 12, the majority, it seems, think he is the better choice. Who am I to say no to that? And again, based on my own experience with the man, as I said, I've seen him go fully with the opposition. And believe me, if you talk to folks who were in government at the time, they would come out fighting against a Tchiroma who was in the opposition. Then based on he looks at the failings of the opposition. This is a guy who wants to make a contribution to moving the country forward. He realizes he can't do it sitting in the opposition, and he moves over to the government. Flip-flopping, yes. Is that the right thing to do? I'm not sure, but he did. And when he got into government, he committed fully to making a difference. And he's told us, in a government where few people actually can put forth resolve they've achieved. He has spent time telling us what he achieved in the Ministry of Communication, what he achieved in the ministry he ran before resigning from government. He's very clear about what he set out to do and what he actually did. And he's, invited people to look into his record. So I don't know, we can we can decide not to go with a Tchiroma and go with some other, a purer, a cleaner candidate. But I'm not sure that would find him or
He
her.
absolutely is the favorite in this election. The crowds are insane and it is everywhere in the country nonstop. In fact, I coined him a virus. You might not like him, but
You
he has
called it
taken
the
the entire
Tchiroma virus.
country by storm. And I mean, you cannot be indifferent to what is happening. You can sense that there's a shift in the atmosphere, and it might as well be that time where the 43-year cycle is coming to a close. But the thing that I want to ask you, in 2018, we saw the number two or the official number two of the presidential election thrown in jail. The government has set a completely new precedent because we'd seen a major opposition leader in 92 or in the 90s under house arrest, but shackled and thrown in jail so unceremoniously. We hadn't seen that before. The government had hit a new low. Aren't you afraid that we are headed towards something even worse this time with an interior minister who has his own kind of way with words and has said some of the most
Incendiary, you can use the word you used earlier.
uncomfortable things that we've ever heard an interior minister say in a democracy? Only yesterday he was threatening to arrest him. I mean, making veiled threats to arrest him. And this is a man who is crazy enough to do the things that he says he will do. He had threatened in private circles to arrest Kamto and said nothing was going to happen. And he did it and nothing happened. He had threatened in private circles to oust him from the race, and he did it and nothing happened. Yesterday, he held a press conference and he said he had information that there was a candidate whom we all know was Tchiroma he was referring to, who was going to vote in his village and hide in his house and declare himself winner the night of the elections. And the administration was going to come and fetch him if he dared do so. And it was a crime. It was high treason. It was highly treasonous to unilaterally declare the results of the election. Aren't you afraid that at 76, Issa Tchiroma could find himself thrown in the dungeons or even killed by this regime that is doing everything? I mean, they're grasping for straws to be able to continue with the status quo.
I think the reason, what explains Mr. Tchiroma's popularity, acceptance by the public, is the fact that they see in him a fighter. I think that's one of the major reasons. And I can tell you, Mr. Tchiroma is not a spring chicken. Mr. Tchiroma will stand up for his right and he'll fight back. And the mistakes, and I want to say this to Atanganji, the minister, and to anybody listening, please, there's a country to protect. There's a country to develop. And this country needs all of its best mind. And it's a country of wonderful people. It is so unfortunate that you, as one of the leaders, one of the people to whom the country has entrusted, its hopes and faith to lead it, that you'd stand and threaten Cameroonians as if they were servants, slaves. I think it's just so wrong for Mr. Atanganji to do this. But again, be that as it may, I think Mr. Tchiroma is going to fight back. I am not afraid. I don't have to be. I don't even worry for a second. Things will play out as they will. In 92, Mr. Frundi was totally unprepared for what came to him. In 2018, Mr. Kamto relied on his legal prowess, his intellectual abilities, his capacity as a legal scholar. He relied on all of that to get him out of the situation. He thought this was a country where we played by the rules and where the rule of law governed. And he was wrong. I went to see Mr. Kanto in jail, and we had a long discussion. So I know I know what his state of mind was. Now, we're coming into the third experience, and they're going to try the same thing. Frundi was house arrested. Frundi, the real threat to Mr. Biya, to the regime, was arrested, was kept in house arrest. Kanto was arrested and thrown in jail. And they're going to try to do the same thing a third time around if the nation does not speak out and react. Then, of course, we have the leadership we deserve.
But aren't these sequence of events from 26th of July to 5th of August and the theater at the Constitutional Council and then all of these threats that we've been seeing, aren't they precursors to what the outcome of this election will be and how things will, business as usual, might just continue?
Well, it could be, but I tell you, we're not in a stagnant pool. We're in a world that, a globe that turns. Things evolve. Change comes. I do not think yesterday's outcomes were a precursor to today's events.
One interesting thing, though, that has become apparent is that Mr. Tchiroma will be voting in his native northern region of the country. And Frundi usually had a base or a bastion in the Northwest, and we know how he could make the Northwest tremble. He could paralyze the city of Bamenda, and he gave the regime a run for its money. Yaoundé being the seat of power and where Biya lives, usually it makes it a cakewalk for him to intimidate any opposition leader who dwells in that city. And so could there be a change of tides now that we have a Tchiroma sitting in Garoua if the government attempted to arrest him?
Certainly I don't think they would attempt to arrest him in Garoua. It would be fatal to maybe not him, it could be him, but certainly the country. It may divide the country in a way that we may not be able to put it back together again. So I don't think they're going to try to arrest him in Garoua. But even if they were to arrest Tchiroma and throw him in jail a third time around, and Cameroonians were to sit at home and say, well, this is business as usual, then there's clearly something wrong with Cameroonian. And we get the leadership or the quality of leadership we deserve. That's what it is.
But isn't there something wrong, to put it in your words, with Cameroonians? Janet Garvey, the US
I don't think so. I don't think there's something wrong with Cameroonians.
In the early 2000s, had said that we had all the elements for there to be a civil uprising, and nothing has happened till date.
No, that's not true. In 2008, there was a civil uprising. In 2017, half of the country went to war, and that country is still in a civil war.
But again, you are correct, Eric Chinje. You had the hunger strikes of 2008, and then at the very end of it, Mr. Biya came out threatening Cameroonians instead of trying to negotiate with them, and everything just came grounded to a halt. In 2017, the crisis in the English-speaking parts of the country became a full-fledged conflict. And 8 years after, he still does not care. And that is the whole scary thing about this whole dynamic, is that you have a president who thinks that as long as he has secured the seat of power in Yaoundé, the rest of the country can burn or be smashed to smithereens, and he would continue to be a president of a phantom country. The Northwest and Southwest have been declared bankrupt. Our country is on its knees, and we're borrowing money to pay salaries at cutthroat interest rates, which you know about. But still, for some reason, he's in power. So aren't you concerned that, yes, the northern parts of the country, which have been ravaged by all kinds of natural disasters, and then terrorist groups, have not stopped him from continuing to reign as the King of King in Yaoundé?
Well, again, Angie,
this time
you're making the case for change. You're making the fundamental case for change. And and Cameroonians have looked around and said, okay, we want change. Who can guarantee change? They've looked at Joshua Osi, who's a smart politician, member of parliament, great experience, good businessman, head of one of the largest parties in the country. They've looked at Joshua Osi, and the evidence so far is no, it's not going to be Joshua. They've looked at my young friend Iodi and said, it's not going to be Iodi. They've looked at Cabral Libi with the range of experiences he too brings to the table, and they said, no, it's not going to be him from the evidence of what we are seeing. So yes, Cameroonians have looked at all of these people and they've said, let's go for the guy who can ensure that we have change. That's the leading criterion now for the leader that Cameroon needs. And they've said it's Mr. Issa Tchiroma. Issa Tchiroma is not perfect. Nobody is. But he brings the elements that the majority of Cameroonians today seem to want. And they're saying, go for it. And I believe it will be, this government has made a lot, the current regime has made a lot of unwelcome mistakes. You've pointed out to some of them, whether it's in the crisis that led to the civil war that is still going on in the country now, or whether it's the way Kanto was taken out as a candidate in front of the entire world, how they made a ridicule of our legal systems, brought the name of, and the honor of this country, dragged it into the mud. That's what we're talking about. And Cameroonians are saying, no, enough is enough, we want change. And then a minister of the Interior in the government stands up and wants to fight this battle with threats. If Cameroonians sit back and accept it, then Cameroonians deserve to be ruled by the people of that caliber. But I don't think so this time around. I don't think so.
One thing that has played in the favor, and I mean, the stars just seem to align for Mr. Tchiroma. You had a northern part of the country that is deeply disgruntled and resentful with Mr. Biya. At the beginning of this year, we saw the Secretary General of the Presidency on a mission there, a firefighting mission there, and it was a very difficult trip. CPDM mayors were threatening to decamp into the opposition because their population was pressuring them to do something. They were sick and tired of the droughts, of the flooding that was causing famine, of Boko Haram kidnapping and killing people. That certainly has played in favor of Mr. Tchiroma's candidacy, but also the contrast that the catastrophic communication style of the other opposition candidate who resigned, Mr. Bello Buba, a very heavy communication style, a very old school. He's afraid to speak to the press, camera shy. He reads his speeches from paper at his meetings. These are probably some of the things that have helped Mr. Tchiroma's qualities to actually come forth in such a powerful way. But tell me, what do you think is still holding Mr. Buba back from throwing his weight behind Issa Tchiroma at this point? Because yes, the impression is that, or the facts are that he has a more implanted party around the country, the UNDP. But on the other hand, it seems like the population of the masses are connecting with another person. What has stopped these two who come from the same city of Garoua from feeding one person and not splitting the vote?
Yeah. Let me try and answer that as best I can. I'm in a very privileged place to respond to this question because both men asked me to work with them. When Issa Tchiroma, prior to leaving the government, he called me and said, look, Eric, I'll be leaving the government and I'd want to run for president and I'd like you to be on my team. Issa Tchiroma did that. And at the time I told him I couldn't because I was working with journalists to help in improving coverage of elections, how to cover elections in an electoral year. So I told him for that reason, it was not appropriate for me to be partisan. A few days later, Mr. Bello resigns, declares he wants to be candidate, and calls me and says, can you come to Cameroon? I want to introduce you to my people as the head of my campaign. So I had access to both men. And I told myself, my God, how did God do this to me? I was, all of a sudden I found myself in this position where the two leading candidates ultimately, I had such access to them. So I thought I should use it to achieve the one thing we all needed, which was have them agree on one of them to take the lead. So I went to work on that. And after weeks of trying, I have a letter I wrote to both. Tried to work with the families, the wives, the daughters, and the two men, and didn't succeed in getting them to have one of them take a step back and have the other take the lead. It didn't work out. So, ultimately, and this is the point I wanted to get to, Mr. Tchiroma told me, he said, Eric, you've done what you could to bring us together. I don't think we would come together. But let me tell you, if we're going out on campaigns, if Mr. Bello demonstrates that he should be in the lead, I will follow him. You can tell him that. Mr. Tchiroma told me to tell Bello, let's go out. Let's test our abilities on the ground. And if Mr. Bello demonstrates that he has more of a pull, I will follow him. This is what he told me 2 months ago. And when they went into the field, it turned out Mr. Tchiroma was obviously the better campaigner. And I would have thought that Mr. Bello would come with him, but it didn't turn out to be that. For a whole variety of reasons, which would be part of, which would leave on the side for the history books.
Now, from your own perspective and between you and myself, does the political apparatus, the machine, the party structure, the implantation matter in this election more than the popular rating approval?
Yeah. I think it's a term that I rarely use, but implantation is it's appropriate, the appropriate terminology here. I think Mr. Bello has a wider spread of party loyalists across the country than Mr. Tchiroma. And that's important because when it comes to elections, you want people close to where the ballots are and who can supervise the ballots. So from that perspective, Mr. Bello is obviously the winner. If you had the two on a scale, but then Mr. Tchiroma is the one with the popular support. How could we get the two to come together? It would be the ideal situation. And if it doesn't happen, I guess
So, what are some of the methods? What are some of the methods that the FSNC is using to have observers in all of the polling stations of the country, all of the elections? Yeah. Because the SDF has presented its list of almost 32,000 polling agents. And I know that the UNDP as well was on its way to present its list of polling agents. Is the FSNC of Issa Tchiroma looking at collaborating, for instance, with the SDF, at least just at that level? The SDF has stretched out its hand. I think 2 days ago, they issued a press release saying they were willing to work with other political parties. Is this something that Mr. Tchiroma is looking into?
Yes, and I went to bed last night hoping that there'll be an announcement and we'll find both men on the same podium today. I don't know if that's happened. I'm in the UK right now. I'm speaking to you.
Well, you look like you're in the secret of the gods as well, and you might be hinting to something that we want to hear.
Well, I'm saying that I woke up this morning in the hope that I'll get a call from Cameroon saying the two were on the same podium, and maybe that's the case. I haven't checked my mails yet, and it's possible that before the end of today we'll find the two men talking to each other.
Tomorrow, Cameroonians, 8.2 million Cameroonians who are 20 and above, are going to be electing a new president. And my question is, if Chiroma were to win this election, he would then have the Herculean task of getting the Constitutional Council to proclaim the actual results of the election, getting the army to be impartial. Are you confident that the army will do its duty, its Republican duty, if this were to happen? Are you confident in the Constitutional Council after what we saw in 2018 and then in 2025?
I'm not. I am not. But what we can do is, all we can do is appeal to the army to play its role, its Republican role. All we can do is appeal to various segments of society to, to think country before they think individual interests. That's all we can do. I think as all of us as Cameroonians, patriotic Cameroonians, as citizens of a country we love, I think we all should demand that people, for one, vote country and not individual interests. That's all we can hope for. That's all we can plead with every one of us. Let me the light. Yeah, I think I needed something here. So, Angie, I think we all have, I think we're all patriotic Cameroonians and love the country. And we think, I believe, as you, I'm sure you do, that we have a great country. But we do not, it's not a it's not a country of angels. It's a country of humans with all their frailties. And we're looking for one of us, the frail human, one of us to lead us. And we're trying to find the one that has the best interests of the country at heart to stand up.
It looks like you have found him, as well as many other people who have endorsed him. You spoke of Agbobala. I speak here of Issa Tchiroma. You have endorsed him. Agbobala has endorsed him. Rebecca Enonchong has endorsed him. And the number of people, I can't begin to enumerate them. They're countless. But I want to draw your attention to the Arab Spring and more recently Nepal. Countries with extremely long stays in power have this way of ending almost always in the streets or in coups. Do you think that Cameroon will be exempt from this? Do you think that even with a victory in the ballots, there will not be a point where there will be labor and Cameroonians will have to be more intentional about their decision if they want this regime to finally come crashing down? Do you think this will be an easy delivery?
I don't think it will be. I don't think so. I think, I fear for the future, the immediate future. I think our long-term future is great. I think we'll be good because we've got what it takes to rebuild the country, to get Cameroon back on rails. We've got what it takes. We've got the natural resources. We've got the intellectual capacity. We've got the ideas. So I believe the long-term future of Cameroon would be great. Now, what we are concerned about is how we go from where we are now, where the country is in a state of advanced decay, to where this country should be, and how we can bring the ideas and our natural abilities and capacities to help Cameroon cross over the hump where we are right now.
I am Angie Forbin, and I am speaking or discussing with Eric Chinje, who is a household name in Cameroonian journalism and a world-class communication executive. We spent a little over an hour just understanding or discussing and sharing his perspective on the stakes of this election and his decision to endorse The favorite of this election, this presidential bid, who happens to be Issa Tchiroma, a former Cameroonian minister, member of parliament, and opposition leader. I wanted to ask you as we wrap up, because I know you are on a crunch for time, and you are spread out into a million different directions. And again, I want to appreciate your time. The Anglophone part of the country, with over 1 million voters registered in a fix, because you have the separatist movement or guild of the Anglophone crisis that has not softened on its stance to a call on ghost towns and to tell the English-speaking part of the country that they should not go out to vote. What's your take on this? The boycotts have empowered the regime to win and have Stalinian scores in the last elections, in the local elections, and this really has not helped the Anglophone cause. In the beginning, it was a strategy that seemed to work. It paralyzed the government and it was unexpected. But do you think 8 years after, and in such a critical election, this is a direction to go? Can you, with your negotiating power, sit down with a few of these leaders and convince them the way you have been able to whisper in the ears of the decision makers of this planet, to give the Anglophones who wish to do so even just 24 hours to be able to exercise their civil duty if they so desire to do so?
Yes. This is you're making the supreme argument that we have tried to make. I've engaged with the NERA 10, whom I'm sure you know, led by Ayuk Tabe, who in the central prison in Cameroon, in Yaoundé. I've engaged with that group and pleaded with them to issue a statement allowing for a 3-day truce during which people can go and vote. I'm sure Ayuk Tabe and the others with him will agree. They know what I'm saying. I've tried to engage with those in the United States, Chris Anu and the rest of them, saying, please allow Cameroonians, call them Ambazonians if you wish, but allow them, those who have voting cards in Cameroon, to go and vote. This has been my constant plea to them. And I'm sure I'm not alone, lots of us pleading for that. Because if we don't, it is the regime we're trying to throw out that will benefit from our absence on the electoral field. I'm hoping they'll be able to do that. And so far, we don't seem to have had much traction with them. They think the point we're making is, Mr. Government will benefit from our absence. And if they don't allow people to go and vote, we might just lose the last opportunity we have to bring in a government we can negotiate with, they can negotiate with. That's the point. Mr. Biya and his government have demonstrated in 8 years that they will not negotiate with Ambazonia or the Anglophone Cameroonian. They've demonstrated that. So what do we expect? Another 7 years of immobility? Why not try? And Mr. Chris Anu, with whom I had a long debate, cannot wrap his head around this. What is it about the stubbornness of some of these men who pretend to want to rule? It amazes me. Mr. Ayuk Tabe understood. Why are they not supporting Mr. Ayuk Tabe, who's suffering, paying the highest price possible for the Ambazonian cause? The Anus of the world and the other fellows who want to be president, they cannot even come up with a strategy, a winning strategy. That winning strategy is having a government on the other side that you can sit around the table with. Make it a condition for even lifting for agreeing to the truce. That's what I've been telling Mr. Anu and the rest of them. I'm not sure why they can't see it. Help bring a government on the other side that you can negotiate with. And if you do not, it's a stalemate. We continue with the current circumstances. Why can't they understand that? I don't get it.
Mr. Eric Chinje, do you have a few final words to make the case for the candidates that you have endorsed, Issa Chiroma, who is the man of the moment of this election.
Yeah, I really hope that this is not about Issa Chiroma, it's about Cameroon. What I see now is the need to save the country. What I see now is the need to take the country out of the hands of a group of people who have benefited immensely from the state of the nation right now. And they'll do everything to maintain the status quo. And this status quo is unacceptable. So I want to tell everybody, we're going tomorrow, Sunday, into a referendum. It's a referendum of this single question. Are you happy with your current circumstances? And if you're not, vote against the status quo. If you're not, it's one or the other. It doesn't matter who you vote for. Vote for somebody, but do not vote for the CPDM. If you're happy with your current circumstances, vote for the CPDM. We're Democrats. We're willing to accept that. But please, if you want change, vote meaningfully. And when I say vote meaningfully, I mean, if you think about your candidate of choice, and do you see a path to victory for that candidate? I believe that it is the reason for which I would, and it's the only time I'll say this, vote for Issa Tchiroma, because he provides all of us a clear path to victory. And we will make sure your vote counts. We are working to make sure your vote counts in spite of the Atanganjis of the world. So please go out tomorrow, vote for Cameroon, vote for change, vote for somebody you believe can bring about change. Or, if that's not what you want, vote for the CPDM. The choice is up to you. And hopefully we'll come out winning. Cameroon will come out winning at the other end.
Nobody in their right senses should vote for the CPDM. And that was my opinion, and I'm owning it. Journalists have been killed. Wazizi, we know the story of Wazizi. They are persecuted. Many cannot go back to the country. And that's just one of the sectors that has been dismembered by the BR regime. But that said, I want to appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And I hope that we see you the next time I see you or we have a conversation. You'll be speaking in a different kind of capacity with the new president in Cameroon. Have a wonderful day and good luck tomorrow.
Thank you, Angie, and great to see you, this daughter of my mentor and friend, and I can't be happier to have sat down here with you.
Let me call you uncle now. The serious stuff is over, so I can call you uncle again.
Yes, absolutely, my dear. Yes, absolutely.
Day, uncle.
Thank you.
Bye.
You take care. Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it. Eric Chinje was our guest this morning, and he has clearly elaborated the reasons as to why we should vote, or you should vote. Cameroonians should elect Issa Tchiroma as the third president of Cameroon. He believes that it will be the first truly elected president of Cameroon, a world-class communication executive who has advised and helped shape policies across the world with regards to the economy while he was working at the World Bank. But prior to that, he's one of the few who actually sat down and had a real conversation with the Cameroonian president, Paul Biya. He knows the entire political class. He has a way of connecting with people and making everybody feel comfortable and getting his points across. He was our guest this morning, and he says Issa Tchiroma is the man to vote for. It's on that note that we will be calling it quits. But first, at 10 a.m., Haman Mana, the founder and publisher, editor of the Le Jour newspaper, who has just published the Cameroon, Paul Biya, the Biya years, a 43-year shipwreck of the Cameroonian nation, will be speaking to us about the stakes of this presidential election. My name is Angie Forbin, and we were live. See you in another hour. Bye-bye.